Welcome everyone back to the Growing Money with Sean Trace podcast. I've got a really interesting guest with me today, and would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Hi, I'm Dori Zinn. I'm a personal finance journalist and I write about money. I've been writing about money and covering the personal finance industry for more than a decade. I have work featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, CBS News, Yahoo, and a lot of other international outlets, but also just some local outlets as well. And I love talking to people about money. I love educating people about money, whether it's children or adults. Usually adults are the ones that didn't learn enough as children. And so there's never enough out there for everybody. So I'm always happy to talk to everybody about it. So I talk to people about retirement and investing, but I also talk to people about how to talk to their kids about money, or even kids, how to talk to kids about about money, whether it's like starting a bank account or budgeting or saving or so on.
That's awesome. Well, it's awesome because the reason I started this podcast was exactly that. I didn't grow up with people talking about money. Money was this other thing that was kind of taboo, and it was just, money was, nice, but it wasn't good. It was just this thing that was there, and we kind of had, like, the people I grew up around just kind of avoided the topic, and that it was so toxic, and it's like, now my daughter is like sitting there, let's talk about money. I'm like, I'd love to. I love that. I'm loving that you want to talk about this and get this information. And then she'll ask me a question and I'm like, and I have no idea how to handle it. Answer that or what type of response to give you. And so it's great to hear that you're talking. And one of the things that I want to start doing is my dream is I'm writing a book with my daughter and about zombie apocalypse and money, taking all of these money lessons in the frame of the world, like a zombie world, because she thinks it's not like little kids, like preteens, but she loves it. And we're huge zombie fans. And so talking about needs versus wants, talking about, investing for the future, talking about all of these different concepts. And I outlined it. And what we'll be doing is having these little mini podcasts and kind of we laugh and talk about funny topics together and explore it. But the whole purpose of that is because, to me, educating people is such a powerful thing. And sharing that knowledge is powerful, which leads me to my question for you. Can you tell me a bit about what got you going down this path? Like, what was it that made you go, hey, I want to write about that?
Well, it was a couple things. I also didn't grow up talking about money. And when I graduated college with debt, I didn't start paying it off. And I defaulted on my student loans. And I just sort of felt like, if I ignore it, it'll go away. And I did that for a really long time, to the point where my wages got garnished, which can happen here in Florida, where I live. And it wasn't until I met my now husband who was like, maybe you should start this budgeting and you should see where your money goes. And you should sign up for this website, Mint, may it rest in peace. It's absolutely wonderful. I miss it already. And I signed up for Mint many, many years ago, and I saw how I was spending my money on a lot of Chipotle, to be honest with you. I was young in my 20s, and I was just astounded by it. And I was like, wow, if I just sort of, cut back, I could probably start making payments on my student loans. And I did immediately. And I started paying them off. And right when this budgeting thing happened, my car of 9 years died final death. And I had to get a new car. And so I couldn't afford it on my own. And I had to get help from a family member, to the point where I couldn't even sign the loan as a co-signer. I had to get somebody completely else. Like, And that was awful for me. I mean, I was very young. I was, like I said, in my early 20s, but it really opened my eyes to how poorly I was managing my finances as an adult. And I had a lot of resentment towards my family, the adults in my life who were supposed to be showing me how to
Yeah.
manage it. But, as an adult, I'm like, that's over. I have to sort of take ownership of this now. Um, and so I did. I started budgeting myself. I started sort of from scratch, figuring out where my money went. But I wasn't writing about money at the time. I have always been a journalist. I studied that in school. I went to Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton. I have a degree in multimedia journalism and multimedia studies. And I've written all kinds of stuff, and I've um, written for local outlets here in South Florida where I live, in Fort Lauderdale. I was an editor for a parenting and pediatrics website more than a decade ago. And when I got laid off from that job, I got the opportunity to freelance for this website called debt.com. And they write, they cover money and money topics and personal finance. And that was my first introduction to writing about money. And even though I had started doing budgeting myself and working on money, it was new to me to write about it. As a journalist, I can cover anything. Like I said, I've covered parenting and pediatrics. I've covered food. I've covered the local community here. I've covered homelessness. I've covered retirement, like people in elder care. I've covered death. I've covered a multitude of topics. And so for me to move to money wasn't a big issue for me. It was just learning the types of things that I needed to write about. But that's all I needed. Once I can learn something, I can share it with somebody else. And I've been doing that for more than a decade now. It's one thing that I know about money is, well, there's two things people need in this world. It's food and money. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I've written about both. And, I really love the money aspect is because you're never tired of doing the work. Because there's always going to be somebody that needs to hear a message of something, of some sort. And so I started writing for debt.com, and then that just slowly evolved into writing for other outlets. I did start writing for Student Loan Hero, which got acquired by LendingTree shortly after I started there, so in 2018. And then I've moved around in as a freelancer and working for myself. So I write for Bankrate, and I've written for Credible and Credit Karma and Earnest and a lot of outlets that you see covering those areas with calculators, with
Yeah.
with with stories about that people need to answer the questions that they have. So a lot of the stuff that I write now is for people that are searching for a specific topic online. Like, what do I need to buy a house, my first house, or something? What do I need for a down payment, or something like that? But I've also written those topics of like, how do I talk to my kids about money, or like, how much should I have saved by X years old, or so on and so forth. So it's been a journey. It's been a long journey, and it's definitely not over. So
Yeah. Well, what's your favorite topic that you've written about so far?
oh my goodness. Oh, um, my favorite topic. There's a couple. So, it's unfortunate. It's not my favorite. I guess it's my favorite to cover because I don't get to do it enough, which is any aspect I can cover regarding like housing affordability, home affordability, homelessness is very important to me, um, especially where I live. Homelessness is very, very big in South Florida. Um, and I'm sure, as you can imagine, it's warm here. So
Yeah.
it doesn't snow here. So people come here because they can be outside, but certain laws here don't allow them to be outside. Laws have been passed where uh, it's forbidden to give money to panhandlers. So any time I can write about um, any of those aspects, it's important to me, because one thing I don't think people realize is how close we are to being homeless. Most of us are one paycheck away or two paychecks away from being homeless. But we don't have to be. We can prepare it much better than that. If we do it a little bit better, and I think we all can. But there are some people who thought they were doing it right, and they ended up in bad spots, and it's unfortunate. And I think in almost all the cases that I try to write or talk about, I go with empathy first, because we never really know what people are going through. So that's really what I try to focus on in all of my writing and all the work I do.
I remember there was a guy that I met when I was just finishing college. Nicest guy, really cool, knew everything about cars. And he said he was passing through. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I'm just, going from point A to point B. And he started telling me more of his story. And then when I got to know him better, one of the most interesting people I have ever known, he had a high-end performance car service station where he worked on, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, everything. And it was all owned by him. One day he was out riding his motorbike and shattered his leg. Absolutely shattered. Just blew out his shin. And he picked up he lifted up his pan and showed me the scar. And he's like, I didn't have insurance. And to keep my leg, it cost a small fortune. It's so many surgeries. And he lost everything. And he said he was fine with it. He was chill and peaceful. And he's like, you know what, this is, I'm okay with life. He's like, I've had good, I've had bad. But I was like, do you feel any, regret or anything? He's like, no, but I wish that I could tell myself before to value what you have, because you are, like you say, so close to not having it. And I think this is one of the things too that was something that I started seeing with finances, that, when I had my daughter, some of the financial practices that I used to have were not good, were not things that would be protective of her. Because, I don't mind picking up and starting over somewhere new, but that's so traumatic to a child. It's so traumatic. And I think that, one of the reasons I went down this and started looking at financial literacy was so that I could be in a more secure place. I mean, as you say, nothing's ever really completely secure. You can have any number of things happen. But, and I started looking at some of the concepts and like, okay, and this, it sounds, I don't want to say it, people are going to judge me for this. When I started hearing about an emergency fund, well, that's a genius idea, because I didn't grow up with anyone talking about an emergency fund. But I was like, that would be so useful. Like having this amount of money that you just don't touch. That's this float that sits there in case you have an emergency. That makes so much sense. And, and I saw family members who had that. And when I had a family member who had a major emergency, and I was just like, are you going to be okay? And they're like, yeah, everything's fine, actually. And I was like, why are you so calm right now? I'm freaking out watching you go through this situation. And they're like, well, we can be calm because we prepared. We've got, an emergency fund. We saved up about a year's worth of savings. They had set aside. They really set aside a lot of money and had a year's worth of savings set aside to tap into if they ever had anything happen. They were very much those like prepare type people. And, and then when they had a huge disaster hit, it was not a problem. And I sat there and I was like, man, I get hit with a week's worth of something. And I'm just like, the sky's falling, And so it was a wake up for me. Now, as you started learning about, where were you going to learn as you're writing these articles? Where do you turn to for information? Because again, it's like you have to find it, to share it. What are your go-to resources, or what did you like to digest, to learn about personal finance?
Well, as a writer working for the places that I was, that's always the most important place, is starting with the places that you work for. So if I'm writing for Bankrate, I'm reading Bankrate, even though I was already reading Bankrate. But for factual resources, I always turned to government resources, to government sites and authoritative places or organizations like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Federal Trade Commission, any, like, sometimes college sites, studentaid.gov, like government sites. I wrote a lot of college. I still write about college affordability and student loans. And so I use the student loan site or the student aid site and FAFSA a lot. So government-centric sites are the number one place I look for factual and learning resources for almost anything, especially when I'm using it to cite in articles. And then any sort of nonpartisan organization that does studies and surveys in that regard, I really try to focus on. So there's some at the student level, but there are others that do that. It depends on where I'm working and writing now, but just learning about financial literacy it's easy for me to say, but it's hard when you're just like, where do I look? And vetting those sources can be a lot, and so you sort of have to figure out when you're looking at something online, like, is this reputable place to be looking? And so if you're ever questioning something, you can always look at their about page, see who runs their company, see who's in charge of them, see if they have any advertising disclosures on their sites, and if they're transparent in the work that they do. Because that's really important, because if anybody's ever hiding anything, like, you should be able to know that. And so if you're reading something and you're like, you should, even if it's truthful, you should question it. Because that's just, I mean, that's what I do as a journalist, but you should just be like, is this true? Is this right? Because, and you have to make sure it's right. And I think we tell that to our kids, right? When we're talking to them, like when we ask them a question, when we're helping them with homework, and we're like, are you sure? Like, you need to be confident in your answers. Like, if we're teaching them that, like, we can't just go and try to do our own research and then just take something as word without making sure that we're confident in the work that we do. So, I always try to look around and see, if a site is reputable, if it's truthful, if it's factual, where did they come from? Because it's really easy to go on, like, community sites like Reddit, and Reddit definitely has a place, and I'm not disputing that, but people can talk on Reddit as opinion, and that's totally fine. But if you're not checking somebody's, work, then how do you know what they're saying is right? And so I always try to just check what people are saying, whether it's a site, whether it's a person. Just be like, let me just do a little bit more work on my end, see if that's right. Because you always hear yourself, like, how am I as a person who shares information, just supposed to regurgitate that without checking it first. And so I'm always like making sure the places I'm looking at are real, especially like with so much rampant fake news out there.
Yeah.
It's something that I always have to check. So.
And one of the you're hitting on one of the reasons I bring this up when I asked that question was because there was a video I saw that said that a lot of young people are pulling their financial information from social media. And so I was like, and even if that's true or not, like, I gotta go source that one, you know what I mean? But it's like one of the things you see is that people are pulling from people, and I see it on TikTok and Instagram. Like, I'm gonna tell you the most important thing to do for your finances. And it's like, who are you, and where is this information coming from?
And who are those people? Exactly, who are they? And even those moments where somebody says, "You should listen to me."
Yeah.
Listen to them, and when they tell you who they are, listen to them. Because if they're not telling you who they are, that's a red flag. That's important, because then, like, anybody can call themselves a financial coach, because there are ways to get certified in a lot of things, and that's important. And I think that's a credible source. But anybody can call themselves a financial coach. Anybody can call themselves an educator, and I think those are important. But what are those people doing to prove to you that they are worth listening to? Just like you would give your money to a store. Why do you trust your money with that store and buying a product and buying that food? You know, you're giving your money to these places. You know, you're giving your attention and your time to these people watching their video. It's you're giving them something, right? So how do you know that these are valuable resources in any regard? You have to make sure that you're checking them. And that's totally right. It's like younger people are looking at social media for those things, and it's awful and great at the same time, because we have so much information at our fingertips to where we can be like, let me see what people are saying. And a lot of this information is absolutely wonderful, but there are so many ways that creators can put, you know, just fact checking information on their videos to be like, yep, I pulled it from here. Like, they can pull that green screen in the back of them and be like, yep, do you see where this says it right there? And I know a lot of people do that, and I think it's absolutely wonderful, where they can just be like, oh, check in the caption where I put the link to this study that I'm talking about right now, or so on and so forth. And there's a lot of ways that you can prove that what you're talking about is correct. But people don't want to do that all the time. They're just like, you should listen to me. And my husband was like, you should be on those videos. And I was just like, I don't know if I should. And he goes, there are people that are absolutely not worth listening to creating right now. And you've been doing this a long time, and you can talk about why you're worth listening to, and they can't. And he's right. Those are those moments where, if I can tell you what I've done for you to listen to me, that shows you that, okay, this person has the credibility. But if you're watching these videos and you're just like scrolling and you're just like, let me sit here and listen to this person. Yep, they said it. How do you know that they're right? How do you know that they're telling the truth? Have you checked them?
Right. There was this martial artist here I'm in Vietnam, and I split my time between here and the U.S. And there was this martial arts guy named, I can't remember his name. I think it was like Nam Huyen Dao or something. And he had this thing where he was waving his arms like this, and people were like, whoa, you know. And there were all these videos online of him doing this, and it became this big thing where like people were like, are you guys for real? But he was putting these videos out about martial arts tips, and he didn't have real martial arts knowledge, you know. And it's like, same thing with like, it was just all fake, you know. And it's like with some of the financial stuff, like if I want to be listening to financial advice from someone, I want to make sure that they have their own finances in order, or at least are working the principles into their life. Maybe they don't have it all in order, but they're working it. You know what I mean? They're on the path. And you know, with social media, one of the things that I was cracking up about was like, I see it with health almost more than money, like people giving health advice. And it was like, remember that one of my family members came to me and they're like, hey, have you heard about this? You've studied a lot of holistic health stuff. There's this supplement that we're looking at. I was like, okay, well, what is this supplement? And I'd never heard of it. And so I looked it up, and they're like, well, should I take this instead of a medication? I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Stop right there. Slow down before you start going down taking something instead of this. I said, talk to a health professional, first of all. First and foremost, don't watch YouTube videos for your health, stuff. And then when I looked up the supplement had like these side effects that were ferocious. It was like, one was like enlarged heart. And there was like all of these people that were dealing with, like, it was a stimulant, and all these people were getting heart failures and stuff. And I was like, and I know the person that was coming to me had heart stuff in the past. And I was just like, stop. Just stop now. I'm not the person to talk to about this, but just from a tiny bit of research online, a tiny bit, I was able to see, and looking at real websites that had, peer-reviewed stuff from credible sources, it was like, this thing was dangerous. And it was definitely not something that your person should be like, I'm going to go self-prescribe this and try this out. I can order it online from some country across the world. I was like, don't do that. Don't do that. And I think that
it's interesting that you say that, because it's so often that people, like maybe your friend and anybody, that will ask you, which I think is absolutely wonderful. I think we should have these conversations with people, whether it's about health or money. But like, they ask you because you know about it, but they don't necessarily have the tools to look it up themselves. Because, like, what if they looked it up? How are they going to vet that information? Because you and I are just like, this site is incredible. This site is incredible. Oh, this one shows me absolutely everything. Look, it's the National Institutes of Health. It had this study, and look at these enlarged hearts. You have a bad heart. Maybe you shouldn't be taking, right? Like, you did that information like within a couple minutes. But I know when I talk to people about money, they ask me questions. And obviously, my first disclaimer is I'm not a financial advisor, and I can tell you what I know. But if you have very specific questions, like, you might want to talk to, someone in that realm, a planner or an advisor. But here's what I know based on this. And sometimes they'll ask me because they don't know how to search that online, or they don't know the tools or what they're looking for. And I'm happy to help with that. I'm absolutely happy to help you with that. But I was like, how are we making sure that people have the tools to make sure that what they're looking up is factual and credible? And as a journalist, like, I do try to do that to make sure people are doing that. But I can only do it for like a small fraction of a group, right? But I can't do it for every single, infinite amount of topics and articles that are on the internet at any given time. So it's sad.
Well, and I wasn't judging the person, but yet, like, I sit there and I look at that question that they asked and that supplement. I was like, of course that's not good for you, because I did have a little bit more information in that topic because I studied health. But then with financial health, like, I'm the person asking those idiot questions. I'm like, hey, should I try this?
But they're not idiot questions.
If you don't know.
But I would, and I think you sort of said this earlier, but like, I would rather you ask the question than just sort of internalize it and just walk around being ignorant. Because I think, as both of us mentioned earlier, like, we grew up in places that did not talk about money. And so we thought we're not supposed to talk about money. And so we're sort of breaking these generational curses. So we're talking about money. So we're encouraging our families to talk about money. We're talking to our kids and making sure they bring up these questions, because, we always tell our kids there's no stupid questions. And as an adult, we're just like, hey, you're an adult, you should be smarter. But if they didn't have that knowledge as a tiny person, as a big person, they might not have that knowledge either. And so we have to be a little bit more forgiving. And that's sort of why I say we have to be a little bit more empathetic with people, meet them where they're at. Because I would rather them ask these questions, and if hopefully I can help them, if I can't answer their question, I can help them find where that answer is at. Because sometimes the answer is, I don't know. And we have to be okay with saying, I don't know. but I'll help you find out, or I'll find out, or let's find out together. Because that's okay too.
I love that. Let me ask you this one. If you were to write a money book, personal finance book, what would the topic be? Right?
You've asked the question I've thought about for a few years, because people have said I could write a book for kids about money, and I said, I don't know if I could, uh, because it's sort of, I think kids depending on the age, but also I think everybody really learns with hands-on experience,
Yeah.
and interaction. And so making things fun and exciting and enticing has a lasting effect. And as much as I'd love to write a book for kids, I think that might not be the place for me, at least in this current mindset that I have. But I've been working for myself in some capacity since the beginning of my career, but full time for 7 years. And so I would probably want to write a money book more geared towards freelancers, contractors, and maybe the self-employed,
Mm,
because that is an area where I think people do want to go to. Maybe they're a little bit scared, because it's not as secure, maybe in their mind, as working for someone else. And maybe what that looks like and how they can prepare for it if they want. Um, we sort of hinted at this earlier, which is like nothing is guaranteed. But I've been laid off twice. And so I think having people know how to prepare for a layoff financially is important.
yeah.
And I'm in a good place as a writer, that I'm like, okay, let me just try to pick up some work in between, these full-time jobs, until something comes up. But what about the people that need a job right away,
Yeah.
that need to find full-time work, that don't have that financial stability to be out of work, that don't get a severance, that unemployment has run out, that maybe their unemployment is too low. Like Florida has one of the lowest unemployment amounts, I think, in the nation. Maybe I think Louisiana has it lower. Don't fully quote me on that one. But there are plenty of other states that have very, very low amounts. Maybe it was Alabama. Sorry, it's not fresh in my brain, but it's when you're in a position that you can't take that job, like maybe freelancing is where you turn. And so I think, okay, what about people that want to work for themselves? What about people that want to do this full time for a little bit or for a long bit? So
Yeah.
I don't know, freelancers in general, but maybe freelance writers or self-employed writers. That might be where I go.
That's awesome. Well, I got another one for you. What's one mindset shift about money that you think would help a lot of people?
This probably goes beyond money, but speaking it is probably the most important thing. And we sort of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but talking about it is better than not talking about it. So if you have a concern or a question, it's better to be open about it. And I think for many, maybe millennials, older millennials, Gen Xers, and boomers, I think that we were told, and then we tell others, like, we don't talk about money. We don't talk about money. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion. We don't
Yeah.
talk about anything. Um, but it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to talk about money. It's okay to be open about it. I still have a couple friends who do not want to talk about how much they make, and that's okay. But they do not want to talk about it because they had a bad experience of how somebody received that information. And so I tried to tell them, that's not on you, that's on them, right? That's
Yeah.
how they decided to interpret that. But you being open and honest is only the most beneficial. You sharing your salary could probably help a coworker. You uh, telling somebody how much you paid for a service is probably good, because then maybe your neighbor won't overpay or will get overcharged or so on.
Yeah.
Having these conversations that maybe your parents thought were too difficult, or maybe they didn't want to talk about, is better for you to have, because not only by sharing that information with other people, but it's also showing whoever you're talking to or whoever's around you that it's okay to talk about. So having that mindset that it's okay to talk about money is absolutely essential. And you're setting a great example for everybody around you. Older people as well can benefit from that. Because whenever they say, like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, like, if they see it, like, it's okay. They'll be like, okay, this isn't bad. Like, it's okay to talk about money. And when the children are around you and they hear it, I mean, there are also ways that you could be tactful and respectful. Like, you can't just be like, oh, how much did you make today? Like, like if the kid is 5 years old and they're just like out here in the streets, like asking you, like, how much did you make? And they're just like, blasting information. That's one thing. You can teach them, how to be, tactful and respectful about money things, but I don't think you should shush them in a way that discourages them from talking about money. Because I think it's important having these conversations with your peers, with your coworkers, with those older than you, with those younger than you. It could actually be life-changing for somebody.
100%. Well, and I wish, and I have some very wealthy family members that don't like talking about money. And I wish I could sit down with them and go, what did you do that worked so well? And I think that, like you said, people that are making it and doing things right, and people who didn't do things right, like, talk to them, find out what they did right or wrong. Because again, like, there's this information gap where, if I want to be fit, well, there's a lot of stuff out there, and a lot of people are more than willing to talk about their fitness journeys. You know what I mean? They're like, I'll talk about how I got into shape, or talk about how I didn't get in shape. Yeah, people will talk about that. Well, with finance, people just go, ooh, yeah, no, I'm not going to talk about that. And I think it's also because people are either A, embarrassed, but B, scared a little bit to share some of that. Am I going to get judged? Is someone going to think less of me? Because, I made all that money that one year, and then, I got that new surfboard, or whatever it was that person did or didn't do, and I think that, I don't know.
Do you think that not people, I'm generalizing, but some people don't want to talk about that because they view sharing that information will encourage competition that they don't want? Unwanted competition that will take away from their success. And to me, I'm in a field that is very competitive, and yet I have so many acquaintances, colleagues, friends that are personal finance writers. And I tell you this because we share so much with each other, because even among the competition, we are caring and respectful and trying to help each other out. We're trying to build each other up. Like, I wish I could remember who said lift as you climb. Oh my gosh, was it Amanda Gorman? I think it was Amanda Gorman, the poet, who had that book, Lift as You Climb. But I think it came from somewhere else. Again, please don't quote me, but lift as you climb. Like, who are you bringing with you? Who are you holding up? Because you cannot do everything by yourself. You cannot. No. And so, when you're up at the top and you're just like, it's a secret, I can't tell you. Like, what are you really encouraging by keeping people out, by not sharing your secrets to success? And it could be a multitude of things. Maybe you got in the right industry. Maybe that industry paid you a lot of money. And that could bring up a lot of other questions for other people who are like, I don't want to go into that industry. Why is that industry so well paying? But the thing I'm passionate about isn't well paying. And it could, that's a whole nother topic. But just having those conversations are probably important for people to think about in their own mindset, but they shouldn't be walking around like, how come they get it? How come they get it and I don't? Like, how about you how can we just encourage and foster those conversations? And I don't think we should be scared of sharing information with people. Like, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
It still is, and it won't ever not be. The more we share it, the better off we'll be. So as much as we want to say ignorance is bliss, it's also exceptionally harmful. So I hope that those who believe they have been successful in any amount, whether it's financial or business, and they are in a position to share how they got there, that they do. But I hopefully they share it in a way that's like, this is why you should believe me, like just like we're talking about credible sources. So like if somebody can do that, they should.
There was the that TikTok account and Instagram they were on as well, Salary Transparency Street. And that was one of the things that I just am reminded of when you talk about that they went out and were asking people, what are you making? What are you making? And it was mind opening for me because I was just like, I didn't know this career paid that much money and this one paid this much. It was like, it's just really blown away that there was such a discrepancy there. And it was just like the whole idea of knowledge is power. I wish that before I chose my major in university, I saw that channel and I saw everyone going, this is how much this makes. And this is not that I might have changed everything, but it might have informed a little bit more of my decisions and said, well, you know what? That would be a nice thing to have. And if I'm going to do this, I understand that it's going to be a little bit more challenging, but it's okay. You can live and learn and adapt and at least still learn how to make money from it. But, you also brought up that competition. My wife is a famous singer here in Vietnam, and there was this event that she was part of this show, this woman's show, and they brought all of these famous singers together. It was interesting because the show tried to pit all of these women against each other. And then really quickly, like have people fight to the top. These women saw what was happening and realized that the only way that they succeeded was by helping each other. And so all of these women came together and were like, when the show tried to get them to fight with each other, they were just like, not going to happen. We're a team. Yeah. We stand together. And they were able to grow together. But it was like, if anyone was not buying into that, there was a lot of damage that was done because, there is this competition, this false idea of competition that is often drives people and makes people react in ways that are not always healthy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But I think that just speaks to the magnitude of just how we are as a culture. It's just everything is competition. There has to be one winner. There has to be a bunch of losers. Why are you loser? Why are you worse? And like, it's just, it's awful because there's always going to be somebody better than you, I'm sure, in every aspect. But that doesn't mean that we can't work on being better and making other people better without shame and guilt and regret. Like, we can be helpful without being hurtful. And that is such an awesome story to hear because, like, look at how well they did when they worked together. I always hear, stories of like, we're better together. And we really are because there's so much more that we are so much more alike than we are different. And when I say things like, don't be scared to bring up money, it is such a taboo topic, but it's also something everybody needs money. So we're better together because being vulnerable in these moments, and being open with people about even just like a small, minute thing can be impactful. Whether you bring up like, hey, I'm not doing too great financially, or hey, I'm thinking of going back to school. I had a friend who said that they were going to go back to school and they didn't want to mention it to people because they were in their 40s and they didn't think it was a big deal. And I was like, why is it not a big deal? Like, you could go to school when you're 18, you can go to school when you're 38, you can go to school when you're 88. And you should be proud of the accomplishments regardless of whatever age you are. Like, it doesn't matter. And when he graduated with his AA, he didn't want to tell anybody. And I think I made my husband like get a cake or something. I was like, this is huge news. Like we should be celebrating everything. And so if he didn't tell people, like we wouldn't know. And I think we always say that when we find out these secrets about people, like we didn't know, right? Oh my gosh, we didn't know. So like having these moments of vulnerability before they happen, whether it's about money, whether it's about health, whether it's about something else, can be life changing because you could save yourself, you could save somebody else just by opening your mouth and sharing a story, especially when it comes to money. Because I know you're like, I'm the one asking the stupid questions, but you know what? I'd rather you ask the stupid question than keep it inside. So
Right. 100%. I'm with you in that because you don't know if your question could change someone's life. And so
Mhm.
open your mouth, ask it, put it out there,
Mhm.
and maybe it can be the thing that can turn someone else's life around. Now, let me ask you
Mhm.
this one last question. If you
Yeah.
could go back in time and give financial advice to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself? Right? Nothing
Oh,
heavy, right?
um, there's so many versions of my younger self I might talk to. So that's kind of
Hmm.
difficult because I started working and earning money when I was 16 or 17, and that was amazing.
Yeah.
And I loved it, and I loved having that sense of independence. Um, uh, so I'm trying to like really think about that. But maybe I would. I think I said this earlier, but I would probably tell my younger self like I was upset with my family when I was learning so much about money. I would
Mm.
probably, I was very resentful. I was, uh, you know, uh, upset that I didn't learn from them at an earlier age because I felt like I would have been better off. So I probably would have, gone back and said like, it's not their fault. They didn't know. They didn't have somebody to teach them. Healing that little girl a little bit
Right.
more with that trauma, because it wasn't necessary. And when you know better, you do better. So I probably held on to that anger a little too long before doing better. So yeah, I would probably just be a little bit more accepting of people's mistakes and faults. And it's probably because they didn't talk about it because they didn't know. And that was one of those instances where it was uh, someone didn't speak up. And
Yeah.
if they did, the answer would not have been, I don't know, but I'll find out. If that would have been the situation, I think maybe things would have been a little bit different. So I think, yeah, being a little bit more accepting and empathetic at a younger age, which is difficult. You always try to teach that to kids, like
Yeah.
when a kid falls down, you help them up. But when it's more mental and psychological, it's very, very hard to teach. So I would probably encourage that a little bit.